See, the reason Kansas and surrounding states are experiencing a fuel shortage, causing some long lines at fuel terminals.
Yeah, diesel fuel most affected. Gasoline could be affected in the future as well. Keenan Penn explains what's causing this and this declaration and what it's trying to do to relieve it.
A fuel shortage in parts of Kansas triggers an emergency declaration from the governor. The goal? Free up truck drivers to make it easier to get the fuel where it needs to go.
We greatly appreciate the governor and the KCC both being responsive to our request.
Federal rules allow truck drivers a certain number of hours to drive, but due to fuel shortages in parts of Kansas, those restrictions have been temporarily lifted. One of the biggest reasons behind the shortage, mostly affecting terminals in western Kansas, including Great Bend and Scott City, is pipeline repairs. That forces trucks to drive farther to load fuel and increases traffic in those terminals. Brian Postler of Fuel True, the association that represents those drivers, says that the temporary lift allows Kansas to catch up and counteract the shortages that we're seeing.
This will be some important relief that will enable distributors to have an easier time meeting their obligations.
Postler says that a longer restriction lift is a possibility.
Right, and hopefully within 14 days, it could potentially be renewed if we're still feeling a sense of crisis in mid-May. But hopefully within the 14 days, supply will be able to be increased and they'll be able to route more fuel to the correct terminals. And then we'll be back to kind of more business as usual.
Now, it's important to point out that there is not a shortage of fuel. This is a supply chain issue. Getting fuel is where it needs to be. Now, right now, diesel fuel is most affected, but there are concerns about gasoline being affected as well. Rachel?